No Rest for the Wicked recently released its Breach update, bringing fairly substantial changes to this early access title, including new in-game locations, new quests, a new endgame system, and a host of other improvements. I held off on Wicked's early access launch, but jumped into this update, and today we're going to answer the question: is No Rest for the Wicked worth your time, or should you hold off for full release? To start, I need to address this game's advertising. Is it a Souls-like, an ARPG, or an ARPG that's Souls-like? I raise this because I keep hearing the devs and some players referencing Wicked as an ARPG, and it's frequently raised in conversation alongside PoE and Diablo. And as someone that plays a lot of ARPGs in that vein, No Rest for the Wicked does not fit into that category. It fits into the ARPG category in the sense that it is an RPG, and that there is action in the form of combat. But what many players may expect from an ARPG in the traditional sense isn't present in Wicked. It leans much more heavily into the Souls-like category of RPGs, and I think that's important to set expectations. Where PoE 2 has started as an ARPG and is adding Souls-like elements, I would say Wicked is doing the opposite, starting as a Souls-like project and adding ARPG systems. The ARPG influences are there. The game's loot system follows what you'd expect from PoE or Diablo. Items drop from enemies in different rarities, socketable gems to enhance gear, modifiers on gear that increase your resistances, improve your damage or health. I can see and understand the RPG elements, but the combat is closely aligned with the Souls series. Stamina management, a poise meter, limited healing options, using iframes to dodge incoming attacks. This isn't to say Wicked is a bad game by any means, but I'd be lying to you if I said it offered a traditional ARPG experience in the line of Diablo. It's more so aligned with the Souls series in that respect, which by some are still considered action role-playing games given the action combat, but I think it's worth making the distinction. So let's focus in on this and talk combat. Combat in No Rest for the Wicked is punchy. Swings feel like they have weight behind them. Movement feels fluid, and traversing the environment results in varying scenarios on how you approach an enemy. Sometimes you'll have all the space in the world. Other times you'll be in cramped corridors or walking precariously on cliff tops. Enemy attack patterns, movements, and behavior are significant factors to consider. You can't just sprint in and try to hack your way through an enemy. They will stagger you easily and are generally quite beefy. You aren't slashing through enemies in 2 to 3 hits, unless it's a crab on the beach. If you're fighting enemies of a similar level to you, you will need to dodge, parry, block, and roll your way to victory. It feels great from that Souls perspective. Enemies generally telegraph their moves well, but there is a learning curve each time you encounter a new bad guy. This isn't uncommon for the genre though. Again, that's Souls influence. You'll be learning attack patterns and identifying moments of weakness to exploit. Enemy behavior I found to be fairly good. I never really felt like enemies were unfair, very aggressive at times, and maybe a bit too mobile with some of their hits, but all around very strong in its moment-to-moment combat. Wicked is a very stylized game with its art direction, and enemy design follows suit, which results in some enemies having unusual attacks you may not expect. This took me some time to adapt to, but ultimately the payoff when defeating tougher enemies felt great, and I was always excited to see a new enemy variety and work out how to take them down. As the player, you have a wide selection of weapons to choose from. Personally, I've largely explored melee weapons, swords, paddles, and the like, but you can be anything from a swift rogue through to a chunky fighter or a frail mage using the game's variety of weapons and armor sets. Within this, you'll find the game's rune system, which essentially acts as abilities in an ARPG. You use focus to cast abilities, which is generated in combat and through item enhancements. This kept combat feeling very fluid, slashing away at enemies with basic attacks building focus to unleash stronger damaging abilities or utility like repairing items or healing. To that, items do have durability, which can be repaired in town. I never found this to get in the way. The only time I've had items deteriorate is through collecting resources. They do lose durability when you die, but after multiple deaths against some bosses, this wasn't forcing me to retreat to town every 15 minutes. It seems to be fairly robust. You need to die quite a lot before durability really becomes an issue there. It all culminates in a very satisfying experience that can at times be let down by the systems that surround it. If I had criticisms to levy against Wicked, they would largely boil down to how some systems interact with one another. But as I start, I will caveat this by saying I expect many of these things to be updated. They've said their onboarding needs more work. Some players may also like the harder grind and collection aspects. But let me break this system down and the experience that I had. In Wicked, you have loot drops, which include weapons, resources, consumables, and materials. You'll constantly be finding loot, or collecting items through chests, killing mobs, and cutting down trees or mining. This in itself isn't bad. Through this, you'll upgrade your city, upgrade and enhance your gear, and cook food, which are then used as health items. I'll talk through city and gear upgrades first. This process feels good once you get a handle on it, but the game does a very poor job of onboarding in its current state. I found myself hitting a hard wall on the second boss simply because I hadn't engaged with these mechanics. But the reason I hadn't is because I'd never been introduced to them, and I wanted to engage in the combat, which I was loving. But after hitting that second boss, I was running my head into that wall over and over before realizing I was under-geared and under-leveled, despite doing a fair amount of additional exploration and optional quests. In fact, at the point I was going to fight the second boss, that was my only quest. The systems aren't necessarily the problem here. I've happily engaged in the grind to improve the settlement, my gear, and my inventory slots. But having my momentum cut short while moving through the campaign, simply to go back and cut trees in order to upgrade vendors, in order to upgrade my gear, felt pretty awful in the moment. If I'd known sooner the importance of these systems, I don't think it would have hit me as hard, and I expect this to be updated through the early access period. And if you do jump in, pay attention to what is on offer in the settlement. If I'd done it, I would have had a much better experience, and I want to say I had a great time, but this could be a jumping off point for some. I was streaming much of my early game and was getting advice which helped me along the way. A player without guidance may end up feeling a little lost. But one system I expect to continue to present as a frustration for many is Wicked's healing system. To heal in Wicked, you need to eat food items, but alone they offer very little, so you instead need to cook them into meals. This involves collecting a lot of collecting, killing animals for meat, finding mushrooms, fishing, finding herbs, and then combining these into meals that provide greater healing and additional buffs like extra stamina. In concept, it's not a bad system, and it can be enjoyable, but it does mean that if you're fighting a boss and dying to it constantly, you will chew through those health items quickly. You are capped at how many you can use per fight at 5, but let's say you die to a boss 5 times. Let's say on average you eat 3 meals per fight. You've just lost 15 health items, and if you die quickly, you've lost them very quickly. After fighting the second boss while underleveled, I then ran out of food. I think off the top of my head I made 6 or 7 attempts, and was forced to go and engage in mindless collecting of resources to make up for that. Now, there is actually a vendor that can sell you a rune that allows you to heal using your focus resource. The game never tells you this. The town you're in is incredibly large, and while vendors are located in the same kind of area, they don't really give you a breakdown of what they do. You have to explore that yourself. Unless you talk to each one, look closely at all of their wares, and find that one healing rune, you would have to do without. This was again something raised to me by my chat. If I'd been encouraged to visit that shop, I could have discovered it myself. Much of this is subjective. Some people like the grind, others will find it unwieldy. Despite my criticism, I do actually think these systems are well designed and work for the world. But limited onboarding let me down a path that resulted in a feels bad moment, and a moment in which I felt I needed to backtrack. If I'd known about these options sooner, my experience would have been much better. But I will say, I'm enjoying this game. Quite a lot actually. And while these systems didn't turn me away, I thought they were worth highlighting. And in saying I enjoyed the game, it might be weird to hear, but the world design might actually be one of their shining achievements. Sakura is an incredible place to explore, both in terms of its art style, but its world design is at the very top. It encourages and actively rewards exploration. It doesn't hold your hand, sometimes to its detriment, but they have absolutely taken the best of Dark Souls level design and implemented it here. You'll often run into doors that are locked from the other side, ladders that just need a kick down, or platforming puzzles that require you to explore your environment to make your way into buildings. It's an incredible experience moving through the world and realizing the verticality of it all. You'll see an item up on a wooden beam 1 or 2 floors above you, move outside and find some stone blocks you can climb, which will suddenly open up an entire new level you've never seen before. This is particularly beneficial as you do revisit some areas, both for farming of loot and materials and for quests. This style of world design means that each time I came back to an area, I'd find something new. A new door I hadn't seen before, a piece of rubble I could climb to reach a stone tower, or a key to open a door I'd found but could never open. Just walking through the world is an adventure which is supported by new enemies that spawn in old areas based on how far you've made it into the campaign. There are secrets around every corner, and while the limited fast travel system may be a letdown for some, the looping environmental design means that the longer you explore an area, the faster you can then move through it. Those ladders needing to be kicked down will open paths to cut your travel time in half. Waypoints are present, but you can only ever have one active at a time, meaning you'll need to walk to many locations when you're moving from one biome to the next. I'm sure this will at times feel tedious, and it did to me on the odd occasion, but it more often felt exciting and engaging to move through the world and see what awaits around the next corner. I should touch on endgame systems as well, but for this video, let's just say they're present. With the game in ongoing development, some systems have been implemented, a corruption-style mechanic is currently in place, leading to in-game areas becoming more challenging in the endgame, and the player being tasked with eradicating these enemies and a boss to clear it. And there is also a roguelike style dungeon that becomes available for players early on that has you cutting down enemies and choosing randomized upgrades. For the current state of the game, they are good pieces of content and admirable additions, but I look forward to seeing how they're explored later in development. And finally, from a story perspective, I thoroughly enjoyed the voice acting and scenes present to date, but this is still awaiting completion. So I'll hold my judgment for now, but it shouldn't disappoint or bore you. Cutscenes are well acted and voiced, and their art style carries over between game and cutscene beautifully. If I had to explain Wicked to someone who'd never heard of it, I'd say it feels like an indie Dark Souls, or a Souls-like. The combat is slow but purposeful, you have to heavily manage your stamina and poise, and failing to manage your stamina or failing to acknowledge your poise will result in you dying. This isn't a hack and slash game. This is a game that requires you to dodge attacks using iframes. In a recent interview hosted by Zizarin that I'll link in the description, Thomas Mailer stated that they aren't trying to be a Diablo. They aren't trying to be a Dark Souls. They are aiming for their own subgenre within these. I think that is a good explanation of what No Rest for the Wicked is. It's an implementation of ideas from both of these genres, but it doesn't clearly fit into either. This game is pushing interesting boundaries, its handcrafted world is a wonder to behold, and on full release, it's going to be one of their biggest selling points, I'm sure. But as I look at the game today, I'm mindful of these pitfalls until they manage to get in there and address them. No Rest for the Wicked is an easy recommendation for me to anyone who enjoys Souls-like combat, open world exploration, and a robust, yet currently grindy crafting and upgrade system that is not only player focused, but immerses you in the world and its people. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you haven't already, hit the like button if you found it useful, subscribe for more gaming content, but you being here, that's what really counts. Thanks for staying till the end. If you want to come hang out and talk all things gaming, join my streams. You can find them right here on YouTube and Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday, 4 PM Australian Western Standard Time. Until then, have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.